Welcome to Disaster Medicine webinar this evening. My name is Judy Wheeler. Tonight we're going to go over an introduction of the disaster medicine courses that the NDLSF provides in Michigan, and just a couple of core concepts when dealing with disasters. So a little bit about myself, my background, so you know who you're talking to. I got my paramedic license in 1993. I got my instructor license in 1996. I did work 6 years on the ambulance in rural health, so I'm familiar with rural health. I taught EMT students for 12 years at Lake Michigan College. In 2013, I went back to school and finished up my bachelor's degree in public safety. And as of January this year, I got a job as the state of Michigan NDLSF coordinator. So I have to read my little, I have no real or apparent conflicts of interest related to this meeting or its content, and it went on me, financial or otherwise. So a little bit about the National Disaster Life Support Foundation Incorporated. It was founded in 2003. It is a nonprofit organization. It was tasked with preparing healthcare professionals and emergency response personnel for mass casualty events. It came up with a coordinated approach to disaster, not unlike the American Heart Association CPR and ACLS, with the thought being that if a disaster takes place, as long as all of us have trained the same, it wouldn't matter if we had any sort of prior experience with each other, we would be able to step up and approach the disaster the same. So that was their thought process, and it works pretty good for the American Heart Association. So again, the goal is to work together seamlessly for a coordinated effort. The NDLSF courses were developed by the Medical College of Georgia, University of Georgia, University of Texas Southwestern, and University of Texas Houston School of Public Health. At present, there have been more than 100, there are more than 100 training sites globally, and they have trained more than 150,000 people in disaster management. One of the first classes or the first courses that they provide is called SALT Triage. So I know a lot of us have been trained initially in START Triage, and this is a little bit different. So the first step in SALT is, again, the global sorting, which is how START begins also, where you ask your patients to, I'm sorry, my PowerPoint keeps flipping when I'm not ready. Where you ask the patients just if they're able to walk to get up and go to a tree or whatever area you've designated. Then the second thing you ask is if they're able to wave to you an arm or a leg that you would ask them to do so. And basically, those are then the people you're going to avoid in a way, because they've already designated themselves as delayed because they can follow demands even though they can't walk. So the last group we're going to go to are the people that are not moving, and that would be our immediates, our people who are deceased and or are expectant. Then step 2 is an initial assessment. So we're going now from patient to patient. A little bit different than START is we are doing life-saving interventions at each patient if necessary. So we're looking at controlling major hemorrhage, opening the airway. If a child, we're going to give 2 rescue breaths. If the patient needs chest decompression, we're going to do a needle decompression. And then also if they need any sort of antidote, like for a nerve agent or something, we would administer that. So then we go to, if they're breathing, yes, go on and check these things. If there's no problem with the things in that box, then we drop down. Are they likely to survive with the resources that we have? Yes, then they're immediate. I'm sorry if there are problems. Otherwise, no, expectant. And then if there are no problems, we go over and make a determination on their level of injuries, severity of injury, and then they become either delayed or minimal. So it's a little bit different. The reason why it came to be is because the CDC realized and recognized that there was no standardized triage method that presently existed. We had little scientific evidence for any triage system that we were using. There seemed to be no consistency from one jurisdiction to the next, and we had no nationally standardized categories or color designations, so nobody was on the same page. So the CDC commissioned a work group to propose a standardized method of triage, and they didn't come out with a specific method like you should use SALT or you should use START, but they came out with model uniform core curricula, which means that any system that you use, you should have a general consideration, you should do global sorting, you should do life-saving interventions, and then you should do individual assessment. And the SALT method meets all of that criteria. So it is also an international method. So the SALT stands for Sort, Assess, Life-Saving Interventions, and then Treat or Transport. And again, the difference between START and SALT, one is that we are expected to provide life-saving interventions rather than just tag them and go on our way. And the second is the expectant category. So this is the category of a person who has probable terminal injuries. We don't really expect them to survive this with the resources, but they may still be breathing 4 times a minute. So rather than just tag them black or dead, we tag them expectant, and then we go back to them as resources become available. And if nothing else, we provide comfort care to them. So just a couple of differences. The SALT method has, they use a mnemonic called IDME, and it stands for immediate, delayed, minimal, expectant, and then dead. So that's how they kind of use it to sort of remember what it stands for. And of course, the goal of triage is to do the greatest good for the greatest number of potential survivors. So let's do this. Let's try one. So we have patient number 1. He's grimacing in pain, saying, "I can't breathe." He's holding his right anterior chest near an apparent gunshot wound. His right chest is distended and immobile. You decompress his chest. Immediately following that, his breathing is improved, and he has symmetric chest movement. So the question then is, what category do you triage him? And you think that was a simple question, but it's not a simple question. So what category do you triage him if you triage him before you provide treatment versus after you provide treatment? Because if we triaged him before we treated him, he would be immediate. But if we triage him after we've taken care of his pneumothorax, then we would say that he's delayed. Except for the fact that people triage differently. It's based on their interpretation of the situation. It's based on what resources you have available at the time, and it's based on your own comfort level. So you could make the case and say, I just performed a needle decompression, so I'm really not comfortable with making this person delayed. So because we all triage a little differently, it's not an exact science. That's why we have built into the system multiple layers of triage so that it improves the chances that we're triaging correctly. And, you know, patients' conditions change too. So you can take the online course. If you see up here, it says register2.ndlsf.org. And if you go to that website, it comes up to the SALT Mass Casualty Triage online training. You can take that one of 2 ways. You can take that as a totally free course at no charge, or if you want a half credit, you can pay $5 and get a half a credit. So either way, but I think it's beneficial to at least review it and go over it. It's just another way of triaging, and because it's international, it allows us to work together a little bit more. So let's go over the courses that are offered by the National Disaster Life Support Foundation. They're basic, I shouldn't say basic, but the first course they have is a Core Disaster Life Support course, or CDLS. The second one is Basic Disaster Life Support, or BDLS. And then the very last one is their Advanced Disaster Life Support class, or ADLS. So we're going to go into those a little bit. The Core Disaster Life Support class is for anybody who wants to know more about disaster management. So you don't necessarily have to be in healthcare to take this course. It's an awareness level course. It's 3.5 hours. It teaches an all hazards approach for the management of disasters and public health emergencies. So just like cardiac arrests, we manage those. We're trained to manage those regardless of what caused them. The same with disasters. They teach you a method to manage disasters regardless of what the disaster is. One of the benefits from this class and all of the other classes that they offer is that we are then speaking the same language. So we're using the same vocabulary. We can anticipate what's coming, and we all are on the same page during the disaster management. They use a couple mnemonics: pre-disaster and disaster paradigm, which we'll all go into a little bit. So that's the first course. The second course is a Basic Disaster Life Support course, and it's a 7.5 hour course for healthcare providers. So it's specifically for healthcare providers. It prepares health professionals for management of injuries and illnesses caused by disasters and public health emergencies. Again, it allows us to work on the same playing field with the vocabulary knowledge, and uses the pre-disaster and disaster paradigm. You do not have to take the CDLS course in order to take the BDLS course. So the pre-disaster paradigm, the PRE, stands for Planning and Practice, Resilience, Education, and Training. So planning and practice. I'm sure we have all practiced disaster drills. But I think that maybe perhaps some of us haven't practiced them thoroughly. And the reason I say that is because I've been involved in disaster drills where they never take a look at at-risk populations. So we're always doing a big drill where there's an explosion and we're taking the ambulance, going to the scene, picking up people who were healthy adults before this took place, and then taking them into the hospital, dropping them off, and going back and getting more. So our at-risk populations are people that are very young or very old, people who have chronic diseases in the first place. Maybe they have cognitive or functional or sensory limitations. Could even be people just living in threatening environments, buildings that are not well ventilated, or lacking in heating and air conditioning, those types of things. So unless our plan has those type of populations built into it for managing those people, we have a really weak disaster plan. So also, we should be bringing together all of the stakeholders in order to write our disaster plan. So it shouldn't just be EMS practicing with EMS, although we do that well. We should have everyone. We should have public health involved. We should have, most time, we do have fire involved, police involved, maybe emergency management. So we should have multiple stakeholders, and we should be practicing with everybody who's involved, and that just makes it better. Develop a plan. You want to use all of the input from all of the stakeholders, maybe starting with historical data, like what has happened in the past, and then doing a hazards vulnerability analysis to see where our areas of weaknesses are. And then once we do that, like normal, we would review and revise our plan based on what we found out during the process. So risk analysis is when we assess for potential vulnerabilities, and we try to understand the consequences of those vulnerabilities in order to mitigate and plan for them. So the next slide is just a picture of hazard and vulnerability assessment tool that you can use. This is just an example of one. You can use whatever is more applicable to your area, but you see on the side you can kind of write the event that you're at risk of. So of course MCIs, in Michigan definitely snowstorms, ice storms, anything you think could be a potential, you know, probably not hurricanes, probably not volcanoes, those kind of things. And then we would go through and rate the probability of that happening. The next thing we look at is what would the impact to humans, property, or business be if that particular disaster took place. So you just rate it on what you think. And then in the green, you rate how prepared are we to handle that potential event. So pre-planning, we would rate ourselves on time effectiveness, resources to take care of that disaster. And then, you know, mutual aid, staff, supplies, what things do we have kind of stockpiled up in the event that that would happen. And then you calculate all that, or at least maybe hopefully this form does it. And at the end, that you get the relative threat of, you know, at risk. How at risk are you and how prepared are you to handle that risk? So there's lots of different forms like this to look at, but I thought it was kind of interesting. Still on planning and practice, continuity of operations. Each stakeholder kind of has to identify the mission critical functions to meet the demands, and contingency plans. So you have to ask yourself things like, you know, things not uncommon to us when we get snowstorms and we say, well, if the electricity went out, what's my backup plan? I mean, I lost electricity for a week. Luckily, I have a wood stove. So, you know, I mean, it's no more complicated than that. It's just, where would our electricity come from? How would we get fuel, food, linens? Where would our extra staff come from? If you're calling in extra staff, then should they bring something with them, or what should they bring with them? And even as, you know, these days, a lot of our patient care reports are electronic records. So what do we do if that whole system crashes and burns? So it's kind of just a what if game and trying to plan for all those things. Health system surge. So again, if you operate at a certain level, a system surge is trying to prepare for an additional 20% of what you would normally do. So if you normally take 100 patients a day, it would be, how are we now going to manage 120 patients? So surge capacity, how do you transport the extra patients? Where do the extra ambulances come from? Where do your personnel come from? What if the communities that you rely on for mutual aid are also suffering in this disaster and are trying to deal in their own area? So, and where do you take them if the system's overwhelmed? I mean, we can't take them all to one hospital, so we have to kind of have a backup plan on if the entire area is involved in this disaster, then what's our next best choice for taking people? And then surge capability is, how do you take care of them? In a disaster, you typically can't provide the same standard of care that you do. I mean, on a day-to-day basis, we're so used to taking care of one patient very well. And in a disaster situation, we're going to have shortages. We're not going to have enough personnel. So a surge capability is how well can you, to what standard can you take care of them when you have scarce resources? Another part of planning and practice is legal and ethical principles. So there's a book called 5 Days at Memorial that I read, and it is about Memorial Hospital following Katrina. And they made some really tough choices. They had patients, they had to decide who was evacuated first, who wasn't even going to be evacuated, what kind of medications they were going to give during this disaster, and it was a lot of medical decisions that they made off the cuff. And unfortunately, following that disaster, they had to go to court and they had to support all of those decisions. So that is like worst case scenario, having to make those kind of decisions right at the moment and then having to defend them legally. So we're better off sitting down and saying, you know, if I don't have enough bandages, or if I don't have enough splints, or if I don't have enough ventilators, or whatever medical supply you've run out of, who's going to get the supplies that I have? And how are you going to make that determination on who gets those supplies? And it has to be a fair plan. So it's a tough decision to do, and it's better to do it ahead of time rather than in the moment. Resilience. So resilience is kind of built into all of us, how well we bounce back from adversity. And it's also built into communities. But we can improve a patient or a person's and a community's resilience. And the way we can do that is by education. So the more the community knows what to expect in a disaster, the more it increases their resilience, because it takes away that fear and uncertainty, and they kind of know what to expect, and then they bounce back better from it. So that's part of our education and training. So education and training, it's essential to the workforce. It's essential to effective disaster mitigation. So again, just increasing their resilience. Training should be standardized and competency-based. It should establish uniform expectations. Again, if I work with you, I should know what you're going to do. You should know what I'm going to do. One of the benefits of these courses in disaster management is the fact that we get to train with so many different people. And we all get to come together. We're like, oh, we didn't know you did that. Like when I went through the classes, I was amazed by what public health can do. And it's just somebody we don't practice with often. So it is definitely one of the benefits. So we want to train all of the stakeholders, everybody we possibly can. And then the other component of education is just taking care of the citizens and families. I mean, a lot of education has to go out during a disaster. So they have to know how to stay safe. Information has to go out whether they shelter in place or whether they need to evacuate. Where do they go for medical help or supplies or food or shelter? How about if they should volunteer? If they want to bring in supplies, where should those go? I mean, one of the problems with disasters is really good-hearted people show up to help. Unfortunately, if they're not part of a registry so that we know that they are who they say they are, it just brings more chaos to the scene. So, you know, putting out that information, like if you want to help, this is the process you need to go through, is beneficial. And then how to access critical information that people need during a disaster. Oh, I went backwards, sorry. Disaster paradigm stands for detection, incident management, safety and security, assessing the hazards, support, triage treatment, evacuation, and recovery. At every stage that we're going through, we have to stop and say, are my needs exceeding my resources? So detection. The first thing is detecting the disaster. Sounds like a simple thing to do. Isn't always simple. It's an awareness that something's evolving or happening, that hazards exist, that we need to take further action and start bringing in additional supplies. So we've probably all been on a call where we've gotten called on the ambulance to respond to a motor vehicle accident. And by the time we get there, we either find that it's 3 vehicles involved or it's a van full of 8 people. So often we don't know from the start exactly how big it is. I know in our area here, we ended up during a snowstorm having 197 cars involved in an accident, and it stretched over 3 miles long. And I'm sure that first call that first crew got, They had no idea that something that huge is what they were responding to. So just being aware. You can monitor multiple sources. I know that a lot of times things will start pinging on social media, Facebook and Twitter. People will start putting things that start alerting us to the fact that something's evolving. A lot of different ways to gather information that something's going on. But that's what detection is actually detecting that there's a problem. Probably a little more subtle with something like biological than like the Manchester bombing. That was pretty obvious. But if we talked about a biological disaster, I think it would take us a little longer, even though we monitor that, to pick up on the fact that we're in a disaster situation. I think we're all pretty familiar with NIMS and Incident Command. It's not EMS that needs this education through these classes so much as it is people like public health and other people that aren't exposed to this on a day-to-day basis like we are. Some of the benefits, though, it's consistent, flexible, scalable, and adjustable framework to help us work. Safety and security. So ourselves and our team first, always still. I know that we're doing a lot more of going into situations before they're 100% secure. But that old adage, don't become part of the problem, is still relevant. So ourselves, our team, then uninjured public because we don't want to end up with more casualties than we already have. Then the casualties themselves and environment last. Safety, one more thing about safety is that it's changing. I think it's always a good idea to keep reassessing the situation and have an exit plan, no matter what type of scene you go into. Assessing hazards has to do with specifically identifying what it is you're dealing with. So I have all these people that are unresponsive on the ground. What's causing it? So that's what assessing hazards kind of has more to do with, like, is it a chemical threat? What's the problem? Realizing that hazards always change. These days we have a lot more risk of secondary devices on scene. So always constantly being alert for what's on the scene that could potentially hurt me. And just maintaining a continual awareness of the fact that changes also. Unfortunately, we have a lot more things to deal with these days. Support, the S in disaster support, it stands for logistics. So it's what do I have on hand? Typically, if you're like a typical EMS person like I was, you kind of overstock your ambulance so that you have more than what you need. But it's kind of just taking inventory, like, how many people could I care for with what I have? What is it that I need? Where is it at? How far away is it from me? When will it arrive? Am I going to get it there in an hour? Am I going to get additional supplies in a day or, a week? And what if you just can't get those supplies? Then what's your plan B for that? And that's a contingency plan for scarce resources. One of the things that they talk about is that all disasters begin and end at the local level, meaning that we should probably have a stockpile of supplies and the ability to maintain our own area, our own location for 72 hours before we can really expect outside help to come in. So, that these days that's a little harder too, because a lot of people, even like hospitals, don't have the stockpiles they used to. They do more of just-in-time supplying. So it's really something to look at. How many supplies do I have on hand and can I make it? And they even recommend that, from a personal point of view, that if you have outfitted yourself for a disaster, that you should probably try to maintain your own house and your supplies for 72 hours before expecting that anybody else is going to get to you. So define the resources that we need. We need to determine the resources availability again. Mobile surge capacities. So there are resources that are out there. I'm going to talk about them a little bit, maybe towards the end, but there are some additional resources for us, regionally, state, and then federally, that we can call upon to help us. And it's good to have them, but they're not going to get to us immediately. Triage and treatment we talked a little bit about already. It needs to work with a large number of casualties. It needs to be something that's easy to perform. I taught the START triage for probably 12, 16 years, forever, it seems like. And it always seemed complicated to me. I mean, you have to remember over 30 respirations or under 10 respirations, and it didn't seem like it's a very quick method of triaging somebody. So, I mean, that just seemed difficult for me, but other people may not have a problem with it. It needs to both prioritize treatment and transport, be standardized. Again, we're trying to do the greatest good for the greatest numbers of potential survivors. So people that we think are going to make it, we're trying to identify them first. We're trying to give them any life-saving interventions that they might need. We want to label them as immediate, and then we want to treat and transport them immediately first off scene. And then the other goal is just clearly communicating to the hospital what's been done on scene. Oh, this talks about crisis standard of care, which we talked a little bit about. Just that your standard of care is not going to be the same in a disaster when you have scarce resources. So I think that's a good thing to know up front, so that when the disaster is over, we don't feel like we didn't perform as well as we should have on unrealistic expectations. So things are going to change in a disaster. Evacuation is the E in disaster. Evacuation is kind of a challenging decision-making process. You need to know, what time frame people need to evacuate in. How are you going to get them where they need to go? How are we going to manage those at-risk populations? Where are we going to take them to? One of the problems with Katrina is that they evacuated people from that hospital and they had nothing set up on the other end for people to go to. So they were literally just taking people in boats, taking them to some designated area out of the flooding and dropping them. No shelters, just kind of dropping them off and going back for more people. So we need to have shelters set up, health supplies, medical supplies, and then there's always the concern of safety and security risk. So they always use the example that when they were evacuating people during Hurricane Rita on buses, one of the buses was in an accident, caught on fire, and actually killed 20 people in the process of trying to save people. So that was unfortunate. The R is recovery in a disaster. This is typically the longest phase of any disaster. It may take months, it may take years, it may be that the community never bounces back from the disaster. The phases is rehab, relief, rehabilitation, and restoration. I think that as they're providing recovery, the good recovery efforts, it decreases the impact of any future, or can decrease the impact of any future disasters. So it's valuable, but it's an ongoing process. So our after action review, sometimes people now are calling this a hot wash. So this is just getting together after the disaster and going through how did we do. I just got back from a Homeland Security conference in Grand Rapids, and I was amazed. It didn't matter what speaker was up there. Whatever subject they were talking about, doing an after action review for, like the Boston Marathon, all these big events that have taken place, all of them said, these are the mistakes that we made. And they didn't even try to sugarcoat it. They didn't even say, like, next time we'll do this better. They just flat out said, these are the mistakes we made, and this is what we learned, and we won't do that again. So just remembering that your after action review is not an option, it's a duty. It's probably the best thing we can do following a disaster to learn from, to learn from the disaster and get better. So the last class that we're going to talk about that the NDLSF offers is the Advanced Disaster Life Support class. There's not a lot of lecture in this class. This is the class, and you have to have BDLS before you can take ADLS. So this is a chance for all of the students to actually get their hands on and put into practice all the things that they learned in their BDLS class. So we have a lot of fun. The students really like this course. It's an intense 15-hour course, so it's a 2-day course. Again, allows us to demonstrate competency in MCI management, disaster management. Have to have BDLS first, and it targets anybody: physicians, nurses, PAs, EMTs, firefighters, first responders, public health, anybody that would have to respond to a disaster. This is one of our stations. Our PPE and Decon station. We did a wet decontamination station. That went through really fast, didn't it? Which again, for EMS, this may not be that big of a deal for us. Or somebody who works in a hospital, they probably get a lot of chance to do this, but other people that come to the course that don't have the background that we have, this is a valuable course for them. And it's good for us too to practice, because we probably don't practice donning and doffing our PPE as much as we probably should, to be honest. Sorry, wrong way. This is our EOC simulation center, so Emergency Operations Center. This is, the students go into the black vehicle, and this is where they get a chance to actually be part of command. So they work with other people, they pull in some of the resources that Michigan has for disasters, and they actually get a chance to manage the disaster. And that's pretty valuable. The other component of this station is that we do a class on 800 megahertz. So again, not so much for EMS because we get that practice, but for other like public health and those type of people don't get that practice with 800 megahertz. So it's a good station for people to go through. This is one of our patient care scenarios. We do multiple patient care stations, nerve agent. We might do a biological station, and they just come in. These are our high fidelity simulators. So these mannequins are really freaky because these mannequins like blink and cough and breathe, and they simulate vomiting. So it's kind of weird for somebody who's been in this a while like myself to have your mannequin cough and blink at you, but it's good practice. This is just a picture. We have what are called bleeding simulators. So they actually simulate arterial bleeds. You can see the blood splatter here from the mannequin. And it's really interesting to see people, how they manage that if they walk in and they have a mannequin that's bleeding. Mass casualty exercises. So one of the goals of the ADLS class is to make the situation as realistic as possible. So the students are going into a building that's dark. We fill it with smoke. We play the tapings from the Boston Marathon bombing. So we have the background is people screaming and crying for help. And we do that on purpose. One of our former students that went through the ADLS course responded to the Berrien County Courthouse shooting. And afterwards, he came back and said that because he had gone through the ADLS class, he was able to go into that situation and focus on his patient care and tune out all of those cries for help and all of that other chaos that was going on. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide as close to real life simulations as possible. It's also a chance to collaborate with working with people from other disciplines that we typically don't have a chance to work with. This is the students, and Dr. Phil's preparing for our entrapment scenario. So these students are putting on their helmets with their flashlights. They're going to go into a dark building, again, filled with smoke. They have to go downstairs in a confined space and make access to the patient. So it's kind of scary, but it's a lot of fun, and I can't tell you any more about what may or may not happen in that scenario because I don't want to ruin any surprises. This is a picture of our volunteers. They had a blast. They had a lot of fun. You can see some of our fake injuries, if my PowerPoint would stay on it. You can see our fake injuries that we made up. And this is just another chance for the students to moulage. So we fill the building, you know, with all the smoke, and we turn off the lights, and we turn on all the noise and the screams and emergency lights. And then we stage all the patients. And then the students have to go through and locate the patients and triage the patients and take them over to treatment areas. And the volunteers had a blast doing that. It was a lot of fun for them. Recertification. So once you go through a class and you get certified in, let's say, BDLS, then you need to recertify every 3 years, but it's a pretty simple process compared to taking the whole entire class. So in order to recertify, you just have to take the online CDLS class, which is $15, and then the SALT class, and the SALT class is free. And then your certificate is good for another 3 years. We also offer instructor courses throughout Michigan. In order to become an instructor, you have to take the BDLS course and the ADLS course, and then you have to attend a Michigan NDLSF instructor course, which we have 2 of those coming up. The instructor courses we have, before I get into that, we have an instructor course June 2nd in Lansing and June 16th here in Kalamazoo. Some upcoming BDLS courses, May 23rd, we just had one yesterday. We're having another one in Region 2 on June 29th, and then October 20th, we have one scheduled in Region 5. So how do we find those if we're interested? That's just a map of the regions, in case you don't know which region you live in. So if you want to find a course, you can go to NDLSF.org, and then you click on courses right here, and then you click on the course that you're looking for. In this case, we clicked on BDLS, and over to the left is a link, find a BDLS course. So if you click on that link, then it would take you to a calendar of courses. You can also check with your regional healthcare preparedness contact for any upcoming courses. And if you got the PowerPoint, then you'll have a list of people who you can contact to see when a course is being held in your area. These classes are worth continuing education credits. That's good news. So the CDLS course is worth 3.5 credits. The basic disaster life support class is worth 8 credits, and the advanced disaster life support class is worth 15 credits. So those are pre-approved credits in the state of Michigan. They're part of the Blue Book, so that's a benefit, I think. So before we go into questions, I just wanted to mention a couple of different things. I don't have a slide for them, but we have in Michigan something called Med Run program. They're med packs. They carry antibiotics, chemical antidotes, PPE, critical medical supplies. They are a state resource. If you get on the scene of a disaster and you need that, you can just call a number and that will be sent to you. So they treat, each med run treats about 50 people. They are located strategically around Michigan to get to any person who calls for them within an hour. That's a state resource. We have something called ChemPack, and that's a federal resource that contains nerve agent antidotes and anticonvulsants. Those are designed to treat 445 to 1,000 people. That, of course, would have to go through emergency manager and government to get. There are 67 ChemPacks strategically placed in Michigan. And then, of course, moving up to federal resources, we have something called the Strategic National Stockpile that the governor can request. It will be delivered to us within 12 hours. It provides things like antibiotics, antidotes, IV supplies, airway supplies, medical surge supplies. If the governor requests that, that is approximately $3 million worth of supplies and takes 7 semis to bring into Michigan. So that's a huge resource. Michigan is ahead in disaster preparedness, which is a benefit. The more I learn about this job, the better I feel about living in Michigan. A couple other things we have in Michigan. We have MIMORT teams, and those are teams that go in and manage the disease patients on scene. And we have something called myvolunteerregistry.org. It's my as in MI, Michigan, myvolunteerregistry.org. So if you're interested, you could go to that website and sign up. You don't have to respond if a disaster takes place. They'll just alert you and ask you if you want to respond. But what that registry does is it will check all of your licenses. It vets people. So when people show up, so a disaster takes place, I make a phone call to my registry, my volunteer registry, and they send people to me. And I know those people are who they say they are, and I know that they're licensed and good to go. So that's another benefit we have in Michigan. So back to questions. And we're still muted. Hello. I lost Emma.
Where'd she go?
I don't know, there we are. I heard one person.
That's Denny. So,
Hi, Denny.
hello, Judy.
Judy,
Do you have any questions?
No, it was done well. I was just at Western Michigan. Just came home for our Tactical Police Officers Conference. So,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, we were over in one of the buildings off Archer Road. So,
Yeah. Very cool.
Judy,
Does anybody else have?
Judy,
I'm
this
sorry.
is Emma. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was muted in 2 different spots. So I apologize. I was talking and I thought you could hear me, and then obviously you couldn't. So
No. I'm like, hello, Emma.
I just wanted to say thank you for this presentation. I don't have an EMS background. I'm not credentialed in any sort of EMT, paramedic, that kind of thing. But yeah. I have witnessed different trauma situations. I've put on different workshops and that kind of thing where mannequins are involved. And I have never had one of the mannequins that vomits and bleeds and all that. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, they are.
The fact. So I just wanted to make that comment because I had no idea that existed. So
yes.
So I haven't unmuted the lines, but I just wanted to let everybody know that you may use the chat box to ask questions as well, and I could read them off to Judy, but I will go ahead and unmute the lines. But before I do so, I just want to remind everybody that this is the last webinar until September. So I will be in contact with all of you throughout the summer to promote the September and future fall webinars. But on the evaluation that you complete once this webinar is done, please list some future topics you want to hear. We do take those into consideration when we try to plan for future webinars. So please take the time and fill out the evaluation, because not only will you receive a credit, you will receive hopefully a webinar topic that you want to hear about. So I will go ahead and unmute the lines, but happy National EMS Week all. I appreciate everything that you guys do. I know it's a really tough job. I don't work in it clinically, but I work with a lot of you on a day-to-day basis. I do want to thank you, and I hope you guys have a great week. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute the lines. If anybody has any questions for Judy or myself, please go ahead and ask.
Some now drive 3 hours to groceries. Now they have to go all the way up the road. The look of the time is dependent on tourism. After 6 years of travel, not a day.
No questions, but it was a really good webinar.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I want want to thank Ed Roth too for keeping his face up so that I could actually speak to a person.
Ed is an avid webinar joiner. He attends most of our webinars, so I've never seen his face until tonight, so I was happy to see it.
Well, it was really wonderful talking to a person instead of a screen, so I appreciate that.
Well, you're very welcome, Judy. I do have a question for you. Over the years and stuff, I've taken basic wilderness and advanced wilderness life support. Is that a part of your same program and office that you're doing, or is that a separate branch or separate organization?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a separate branch. I just do disaster medicine.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I'll definitely be looking for more information about these. It sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Levels you've got there.
Yeah, well, you have my email address too, so if any of you want to contact me, if you have any questions, you can do that too about upcoming courses or anything like that.
I live in Lawrence, and I'm a part of Region 8, so
yes,
I'll definitely be looking at possible courses nearby.
Yeah, they just did one yesterday in your area.
Yeah, I saw that on the list. I hadn't heard anything about that.
Yeah. Yep. We can maybe I can get up there and we can do some more.
And maybe I can join you.
Yeah, that would be great.
That'd be great.
You know, Judy, you did say that I could attend one, couldn't I?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, because like I said, I don't have any licensure of, being a certified EMT, paramedic, that kind of thing, but I think these are really valuable and, definitely something that I would be, interested in just observing.
Yes.
It'd be a great experience.
Yeah, it would probably be like the CDLS course would probably be good for you because it's kind of an introductory awareness level course.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
definitely.
Yeah. And like Judy mentioned, information is on the PowerPoint, but if you have any questions or comments after the webinar, please reach out to my sister, Judy. And if you want to hear more information on this, please reach out. And whether that's trying to host a class in your area, or if you want another webinar on something more specific related to this topic, please reach out. Just because the webinars are done for the year doesn't necessarily mean my work is done. So wanted to put that out there as well, but if there's no other comments or questions.
Somebody had a question, I think.
Oh, go ahead. Did someone have a question for Judy?
It sounded like someone started.
Oh.
Oh yeah, that would probably be me. This is Wendy from Baraga, and I just want to let you know I went on the Michigan Volunteer Registry, and it was really easy to get on there. I'm already all registered.
Oh, wonderful, beautiful. Good for you.
I'm also like I'm in Region 8 too.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
It didn't take
Sounds
me
like.
long, 'cause I went on one of the other sites a couple weeks ago, and it was pretty easy to get on there and register, and it didn't take long at all.
Good. Wonderful, wonderful. That's great.
Any other last minute questions or comments for Judy or myself?
Judy?
Yes.
This is Julie Finn. I'm a licensed medical first responder, but I'm also a licensed massage therapist, which is under Allied Healthcare. I'm the chapter coordinator for the community service massage team. And we have two teams. One works with just, community outreach, like, nonprofits and things. The other part is emergency division. And
Uh-huh.
do you recommend that any of the participants that join the emergency division take the BDL beyond the basic disaster classes? Do you recommend that I put that into have them take those classes too, so that they can learn, get some more training?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Because
I think the classes are beneficial, for a lot of different people who work in different, different organizations.
we're trying to get in with M1 DMAT, because now we are licensed
Mhm.
in allied healthcare, but so far
Yes.
we haven't been able to. I need to make the connection with someone from there. But
Yeah.
like you were saying, we don't respond like right away. We go out, we wait at least 72 hours before we go in, because
Right.
we want to make sure that everything's safe for everyone. And
Sure.
you learn that post 9/11, after 9/11,
Yeah.
that
Yep.
one of our chapters went to the Pentagon, and we found out that. And then the other thing is we had some massage therapists that went to Ground Zero, and now they're all dealing with some, that they either have health issues, or a lot of them, when they were debriefing, they never got properly debriefed, and there's other issues.
Oh, that's too bad. That's unfortunate. Yes, I think that the classes are beneficial. It's not just for EMS, fire, and police.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Judy, thank you very much. Very, very interesting program. I've done the START and Jumpstart for probably 5 years now. So I was really glad to see the SALT presented.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Nope.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Judy. I sincerely appreciate you taking your time out tonight and presenting this topic. I thought it was a very beneficial course, and I'm sure everybody on the line does think the same. And again, happy National EMS Week, everyone.
Yes.
And please be in touch this summer, guys. I will be around, so don't lose touch, and we'll be back running in September.
Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to present tonight.
Well, you are very welcome. Like I said, it's very, very helpful information, and I think it's really awesome that you go in different regions too. I think that's really, really logical.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Happy EMS Week, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
You too. All right, everyone. Have a great night and happy spring. And I hope you have a fantastic summer if I don't talk to you. So I will see you in the fall.
You too.
Emma, did you get that I was here for the entire thing? Because I know I logged in last minute.
Is that Julie or which?
Christina.
Oh, yes, Christina, I did see that you joined, and I did get everybody else that joined probably 5 minutes in. I got you, unless you only signed up via audio. But I saw that Christina and Sandy joined. Who else? I think that's it. Is there anybody else? Oh, and Anne, I saw that you're on, so I'm very happy to see that you joined. Anybody else that joined late that I didn't catch at the beginning? And if I did miss you for some reason, I know many of you are my regulars. If you don't receive my email after this, please just shoot me an email, and I'll make sure I get you the information you need. All right. Well, have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you.
Thank you.